to Copilot Podcasts. Big Tech is spending $725 billion on AI this year. You know how much they made back in AI service revenue last year? About $25 billion. That's nearly 30 times more going out than coming in. Either this is the greatest long-term bet in corporate history or the most expensive science experiment ever run. Today, we're breaking down the AI arms race, specifically who's actually winning, what the real battlegrounds are beyond the chatbot wars you already know about, and what this spending frenzy means for where AI goes next. By the end of this episode, you'll be able to see the AI competition the way insiders do, not as one race, but as several happening simultaneously. And I've got someone here who's been deep in all of it. Let's get into it.
The first thing to understand is that the global AI market hit $514.5 billion in revenue in 2026, according to IDC and Statista data, and it's forecast to reach $3.5 trillion by 2033. So when people ask who's winning, the honest answer is, winning what, exactly? Because there are at least 3 separate races happening at the same time.
Okay, yeah, break that down for me. What are the 3 races?
You've got the chip race, the cloud race, and the model race. And they're all interconnected, but have completely different leaders. The chip race, NVIDIA is basically running away with it. The cloud race, that's a 3-way fight between Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. And the model race, that's where it gets really dramatic, because that's the OpenAI versus Anthropic story.
Let's start with chips, because I feel like people sleep on how foundational that layer is.
It is genuinely the foundation of everything. According to IDC, NVIDIA controls an estimated 81% of the AI data center chip market in 2026. Its nearest rival, AMD, holds roughly 10%. And NVIDIA posted $44.1 billion in revenue in just Q1 of its fiscal 2026, with data center sales making up 90% of that total. That's a 69% year-on-year jump.
Wait, 90% of their revenue is data centers now? That's wild.
Right, and here's the thing that makes NVIDIA's story so interesting. This is a company that started as a gaming chip maker, and now it's the backbone of the entire AI economy. The Wall Street Journal just ranked it the #1 company best positioned for an AI-driven future, topping Alphabet, Microsoft, Meta, and Cisco in their inaugural ranking this month.
That glow-up from gaming chips to running the AI economy is honestly one of the most unexpected corporate transformations I can think of.
And it's not without risk. Just last Friday, a sell-off wiped out around $1.3 trillion in market value across U.S.-traded semiconductor stocks. The PHLX chip index dropped 10.3%, its steepest single-day decline since March 2020. NVIDIA itself fell around 6%, so even the leader isn't immune to volatility.
So the chip layer is NVIDIA's game to lose. What about the cloud race?
The cloud race is where it gets really competitive. According to Synergy Research data, AWS holds about 30% of the cloud infrastructure market, Azure is at 20%, and Google Cloud is at 13%. But the growth rates tell a different story than the market share numbers.
How so?
Google Cloud grew 63% year-on-year in Q1 2026, reaching $20.03 billion. That outpaced AWS, which grew 28%, and Azure, which grew 39%. And Google's revenue from generative AI products specifically grew 800% over the same window. Alphabet CEO Sundar Pichai said enterprise AI solutions have become the primary growth driver for Google Cloud for the first time ever. That's a structural shift, not a one-off quarter.
800% growth. That number is almost hard to process.
It is. And Microsoft isn't sitting still either. Microsoft's AI business reached a $37 billion annual revenue run rate in early 2026, up 123% year-on-year. They've got that deep partnership with OpenAI embedded across Azure, and it's clearly paying off. AWS Bedrock, Amazon's managed AI service, saw customer spending jump 170% from Q4 2025 to Q1 2026. So all 3 are growing fast, just at different rates.
So the cloud race is genuinely a 3-horse race. Now let's get to the model race, because this is where the drama really is.
The model race is where the story gets almost cinematic, and it actually starts with a rivalry that most people don't fully know the origin of. Dario Amodei, who is now the CEO of Anthropic, used to be the VP of research at OpenAI. He left in late 2020 with several colleagues to found Anthropic, which was built around a promise to prioritize AI safety.
So Anthropic was literally born out of OpenAI.
Exactly. And then, in late 2022, OpenAI caught wind that Anthropic was building an AI-powered chatbot. According to Reuters, Sam Altman immediately directed employees to fast-track a competing product. 2 weeks later, they released ChatGPT. That's the origin story of the generative AI boom we're all living through right now.
So the thing that changed the world, ChatGPT, was essentially rushed out because of competitive pressure from a company that spun out of OpenAI. That's a wild loop.
Reuters actually put it directly. If not for the intense rivalry between Anthropic and OpenAI, the generative AI boom might not have arrived so quickly. Competition accelerated the timeline for all of us.
And now they're both racing to go public at the same time?
Yes, and this is happening right now. Anthropic jumped in first, announcing on June 1st that it had made a confidential filing with US regulators. OpenAI followed just a week later. OpenAI is reportedly targeting a valuation around $1 trillion. According to Forbes, OpenAI had more than $25 billion in annualized revenue at the end of February, and Anthropic's revenue run rate crossed $30 billion in early April.
Wait, Anthropic's revenue run rate is actually higher than OpenAI's right now?
Based on those numbers from Forbes, yes. And the IPO race is so intense that both companies are using some of the same banks, which has forced those banks to build internal walls between deal teams to prevent information from leaking. Reuters reported that executives at both companies have been pressing their IPO advisors for intel on the rivals' plans. It's genuinely unprecedented for two direct competitors this large to be raising capital simultaneously.
That detail about the banks building internal walls is something. Like, the competition is so fierce, it's creating logistical problems on Wall Street.
And the stakes are enormous. According to TLDL's AI company rankings, OpenAI is valued at around $850 billion and Anthropic at $380 billion. Together, they account for more than 90% of the total valuation in the foundation model category. The gap between those two and everyone else, xAI at $50 billion, Mistral at $10 billion, is staggering.
So it's basically a two-company race at the top of the model layer, with everyone else fighting for scraps.
For now, but the chatbot market share data tells a more nuanced story. According to SimilarWeb data cited by Companies History, ChatGPT commanded 87% of global AI chatbot traffic in January 2025. By January 2026, that had dropped to 64 to 68%. Meanwhile, Google Gemini surged from 5.4% to 18.2% over the same period.
So ChatGPT is still dominant, but losing ground fast.
And Grok, Elon Musk's AI from xAI, rose to 15.2% of US mobile chatbot market share, up from just 1.6% a year prior. That's a massive jump. OpenAI still reported 900 million weekly active users by February 2026, more than double the 400 million a year earlier. But Claude from Anthropic is winning on engagement. It recorded 34.7 minutes per daily user in January 2026, the highest of any platform tracked by Apptopia.
So Claude users are spending more time in the app than anyone else. That's a really interesting metric. It's not just about who has the most users, it's about depth of engagement.
Exactly. And that matters because it signals something about the quality of the experience and the use cases people are bringing to it. Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei said recently, and I'm quoting here, "The future belongs to companies that can deliver both cutting-edge capabilities and trustworthy AI systems at scale." That's a direct shot at the idea that raw capability alone wins.
That's a really interesting framing, capability plus trust. Because there's been a lot of conversation about whether safety-focused AI can actually compete with the fastest-moving players.
And the Stanford Hey AI 2026 AI Index has something really relevant here. According to their report, the US-China AI model performance gap has effectively closed. US and Chinese models have traded the lead multiple times since early 2025. DeepSeek R1 briefly matched the top US model in February 2025. As of March 2026, Anthropic's top model leads by just 2.7%. So the margins at the frontier are razor thin.
2.7% separating the leader from the pack. That's basically nothing.
Right. And Stanford Hey AI also noted something that I think is underappreciated. AI capability is not plateauing, it's accelerating. On a key coding benchmark called SWE Bench Verified, performance rose from 60% to near 100% in a single year. AI agents went from 12% to about 66% task success on OS World, which tests agents on real computer tasks. The pace of improvement is genuinely hard to keep up with.
And yet, and this is the thing that gets me, Stanford Hey AI also pointed out that the top AI model can win a gold medal at the International Mathematical Olympiad, but can only read an analog clock correctly about 50% of the time. That jagged frontier idea is so strange.
It's one of the most counterintuitive things about where AI actually is right now. PhD-level science questions? Handled. Analog clock? Coin flip. It tells you that these systems are genuinely powerful, but also genuinely weird in ways that matter for real-world deployment.
Let's zoom out a bit. We've been talking about the US players mostly, but there's a whole geopolitical dimension to this race, right?
Absolutely. According to Stanford Hey AI's 2025 AI Index report, US private AI investment hit $109.1 billion in 2024. China came in second at $9.3 billion. That's an 11.7 times gap in a single year, and that's actually wider than the 4 times cumulative lead the US held from 2013 to 2024 combined.
So the US is pulling further ahead on investment, even as the model performance gap closes.
That's the tension. China leads in publication volume, patent output, and industrial robot installations, according to Stanford AI. But the US produces more top-tier models and higher impact patents. And there's a hardware dependency that cuts across everything. The Stanford report noted that the United States hosts 5,427 data centers, more than 10 times any other country. But almost every leading AI chip is fabricated by a single company, TSMC in Taiwan.
One foundry. The entire global AI hardware supply chain runs through one foundry in Taiwan.
That's the supply chain risk that keeps a lot of people up at night. TSMC has started a US expansion that began operations in 2025, but the concentration is still remarkable. Tech Insights noted in their 2026 AI Outlook that the US-China rivalry is actively redefining AI supply chains, with China accelerating open-source model adoption while the US leads in hardware innovation.
And open source is its own interesting thread here, because that's not just a China strategy. Companies like Mistral in France are doing it too.
Mistral is a fascinating case. According to Forbes' 2026 AI 50 list, Mistral is selling its open-weight models not just to large corporations like Cisco, but also to European government agencies. And its local roots in France are actually a competitive differentiator. European governments want AI that isn't entirely dependent on US companies. That's a real market.
So geography and trust are becoming competitive advantages, not just raw capability.
Exactly. And Forbes also highlighted some of the more niche players doing genuinely interesting things. Physical Intelligence in San Francisco raised $1 billion to train foundational models for robots, collecting data from human teleoperators controlling humanoids in realistic environments like kitchens and bedrooms. That's a completely different frontier than the chatbot wars.
Humanoids in kitchens and bedrooms. That's a sentence that would have sounded like science fiction 5 years ago.
And Chai Discovery, a 2-year-old startup valued at $1.3 billion, is using AI to create new medicines and speed up drug development. Rogo's AI software is used by 25,000 bankers and investors. The competition isn't just at the frontier model level. It's vertical, it's sector-specific, and it's moving fast.
Let me push back on something, though. We've been talking about all this growth and competition, but there's a real question about whether the economics actually work. That $725 billion spending versus $25 billion in revenue gap, isn't that a problem?
It's the central question. And the honest answer is that it depends on your time horizon. According to Quantum Run's analysis, big tech's combined AI spending will reach $725 billion in 2026, nearly 30 times the roughly $25 billion in AI service revenue these companies generated in 2025. That gap tells you where the capital is moving fastest, and it tells you that most of the value hasn't been captured yet.
So the bet is that the revenue will catch up to the spending.
That's the bet. And McKinsey's framing from their September 2025 paper on the agentic organization is useful here. They describe AI as driving marginal cost toward the cost of compute, meaning once a process is redesigned to run through intelligent systems, the cost of serving one more customer becomes almost negligible. That's a fundamentally different economic model than anything we've seen before.
So the companies that crack that model, where scaling doesn't mean proportionally scaling costs, those are the ones that win.
That's the theory. And the adoption numbers suggest it's not just theory anymore. According to Stanford Hay AI, organizational adoption of AI reached 88% in 2026. 4 in 5 university students now use generative AI. But here's the sobering counterpoint. According to Quantum Run's data, 78% of companies worldwide use AI in at least one function, but only 1% describe their rollout as mature.
Only 1% mature. So almost everyone is using it, but almost no one has actually figured it out yet.
Which is actually an opportunity as much as it is a problem. The companies that help enterprises get from we're using AI somewhere to we've actually integrated it into how we operate, that's where a lot of the next wave of value gets created. And that's why the enterprise market is becoming such a critical battleground.
And PwC's estimate that AI could contribute $15.7 trillion to the global economy by 2030, that's the prize everyone is racing toward.
That's the number from Design Rush citing PwC, yes. And to put it in context, that would surpass the combined economic output of China and India. So when you understand the scale of what's at stake, the $725 billion in spending starts to look less like recklessness and more like a calculated land grab.
A $15.7 trillion prize, and everyone is spending like it.
And the Ropes and Gray H1 2025 Global AI Report had a line that really stuck with me. 40% of respondents in PwC's CEO survey said their companies won't survive the next decade if they don't chart a new path amid AI-driven change. That's not hype. That's existential pressure driving the spending.
4 in 10 CEOs saying their company might not survive without AI. That reframes the whole conversation.
It does. And it explains why even companies that aren't AI native are pouring money in. The cost of inaction is being priced as higher than the cost of investment. That's a significant psychological and strategic shift.
So when you step back from all of this, the chip wars, the cloud wars, the model wars, the IPO race, the geopolitical dimension, what does it actually come down to?
It comes down to the fact that this isn't one race. It's a stack of races happening simultaneously, and different companies are winning at different layers. NVIDIA is winning the infrastructure layer. AWS still leads cloud by market share, but Google is growing fastest. OpenAI and Anthropic are neck and neck at the model layer, with Anthropic actually ahead on revenue run rate right now. And the US leads globally, but the China gap is closing faster than most people expected.
And the wild card is that the performance gap between the best models is now just 2.7%, according to Stanford AI. So the technical lead can flip in a matter of months.
Which means the moat isn't just the model anymore. It's the ecosystem around it, the partnerships, the enterprise integrations, the trust, the distribution. That's why Dario Amode's framing of capability plus trustworthiness at scale is actually a strategic statement, not just a value statement.
And the IPO race adds another dimension. Whoever goes public first gets to frame how investors value the entire category. That's not just a financial event, it's a narrative event.
Exactly. And Anthropic moved first on that too, filing confidentially on June 1st, before OpenAI followed a week later. The race for narrative control is as real as the race for market share.
Here's what I keep coming back to, though. The Stanford HAI finding that AI can win a gold medal at the International Math Olympiad, but can't reliably read an analog clock. That jagged frontier is a reminder that even the leaders are still figuring out what these systems actually are.
And that's maybe the most important thing for anyone watching this race to hold on to. The companies spending $725 billion are betting on a technology that is simultaneously more capable than most people realize and more limited than the hype suggests. The winners will be the ones who navigate that gap honestly.
So here's what this really comes down to. We started with that jaw-dropping number, $725 billion going out, $25 billion coming back in. And by the end of this conversation, that gap looks less like a warning sign and more like a map of where the next decade of economic value is being built.
The companies that understand they're not just building products, but building the infrastructure of a new economic era, those are the ones making the bet that makes sense. And the data suggests the bet is being made at every layer: chips, cloud, models, and now public markets.
And for anyone trying to make sense of this from the outside, whether you're a student, someone in tech, or just someone who uses these tools every day, the key insight is that the AI you interact with is just the surface. Underneath it is a layered competition involving chips, data centers, cloud infrastructure, and billions of dollars in bets on what intelligence will be worth.
And the fact that 88% of organizations are now using AI, but only 1% call their rollout mature, means the real transformation hasn't even happened yet. We're in the infrastructure building phase. The applications that change daily life are still being figured out.
Which means the race we're watching right now, as dramatic as it is still just the opening act.
That's the right way to think about it. The companies racing to IPO, the chip wars, the chatbot market share battles, these are all positioning moves for a much larger game that hasn't fully started yet.
And remember, ChatGPT, the thing that kicked all of this off, was rushed out in 2 weeks because of competitive pressure. The entire generative AI era we're living in was accelerated by a rivalry. That's how fast things can move when the stakes are this high.
And that rivalry is only getting more intense. Two companies that share a founding story, racing each other to Wall Street, with the same banks in the middle trying not to let information leak. If that's not a sign of how serious this has gotten, I don't know what is.
Big tech is spending $725 billion this year. The prize is potentially $15.7 trillion by 2030. And the whole thing was accidentally accelerated by a 2-week sprint to beat a competitor. Whatever happens next in this race, it will not be boring. Thanks for being here on Copilot Podcasts. And the next time someone asks you who's winning the AI race, you'll know the real answer. It depends on which race you're watching.